Hey, this is a response video to Mordian Glory, who put out like months back an excellent video on tanks in bolt action. And of course, once I viewed it, I had thoughts. So here they are. I'm going to disagree with a massive amount of what they say on Mordian Glory, but please notice my disclaimers here at the beginning, because they are really they're really important for the context of why I disagree. And yeah, so let's go. Responding to Mordian Glory, by the way, link to their video in the description. So the top tanks for beginners, rookies. Now, disclaimers, I am not trying to start beef. I may disagree with almost all they say, but that I think is just because I have very different priorities from what Mordian Glory excellently lays out in their video. So for Mordian Glory, he really easily lays out that his priorities is that the tanks that he recommends needs to be easy to learn, they need to be available as minis, and they need to be thematic for the army. None of that is important to me. If we're going to talk about the best tanks, also for beginners, I'm going to recommend you the tanks that are going to win you games, to be useful so they don't end up on your shelf having not been used at all, and fits the playstyle of the army that you're building them in. So that is the recommendations. That is what I think constitutes the best tanks. All that being said, please don't go out and buy a lot of tanks right now, because we're all waiting for version 3 and we do not know anything about what will be good in version 3. So, but right now, this is the top tanks if you want to win games and have tanks that you actually use and fits the army that you're playing. First up is the British. Now, Mordian Glory recommends the Cromwell. That is not a useful tank at all. We are never seeing that in tournaments. By the Darker Steward. If you want to win games, the Darker Steward, the Steward that is the early war version of the Steward, seen here in a Soviet version with the extra LMGs, that's just massively useful. And that is also useful for beginners. Having that powerful, I can shoot whatever that unit is, and yes, you will lose it. That will happen, but you'll also lose the Cromwells and the Panzer 3s and 4s. That will also... Tanks are not really very survivable here in bolt action. There's a lot of things that can take them out. Flamethrowers are really good at taking out tanks. Soviet dog mines, really good at it. And pins, just pins, like you might have the hardest tank in the game and you'll get pinned to smithereens. So what tanks needs to be is they need to be deadly. That's the only reason why you will find your tank useful. And the Steward is the most bang for the bucks that you will get as a British player. Now, there are other tanks that will prove useful depending on your playstyle at some point. Yes, the Cromwell is not among them. I own a Cromwell. I've never ever seen the use for it. Not once. I've never seen the tournament where that Cromwell was placed on the table. Not once. In all the tournaments I've attended. Not once. So maybe for a thematic game at home, okay, you have a Cromwell, field it, but you're never going to use it. So buy a Steward if you're going to buy something. For Americans, buy another Steward. And this is going to be a little bit repetitive, I know, but the Steward is just so damn useful. Now, Mordian Glory recommends the Sherman. And I see one Sherman being useful and used, and it's really difficult to play, so I would not recommend it for a beginner. If you're going to win games, if you're going to go to tournaments as a beginner, don't bring a Sherman. It's not useful. The 105, the Sherman 105, the Sherman with a howitzer is useful, but difficult to play. All the other Shermans, never seen them. Never seen them because they're not useful. They are heavy tanks, they're point sinks, they don't actually do that much damage, and it's very, very rare that you have a tank off, a tank duel where your tank is fighting their tank. That typically doesn't happen. Your tank is typically going to try and kill infantry, and for that, the Darker Steward is second to none. It's the best tank for doing that. So get yourself another Darker Steward. Now, what about the Soviets? Well, you guessed it. Buy yourself another Darker Steward. I know this gets repetitive. I know it's boring as fuck. Sorry, I can't swear on YouTube. It really is a little bit boring. I agree, completely boring. But buying what Mordian Glory recommends, the T-34, it's not going to be helpful, especially not for rookies. That is another point sink into a medium tank that is really not very useful. It's not massively more killy than the Steward. Actually, it's less killy in some respects. And it's not massively more survivable either, because whatever kills the Steward will kill the T-34 as well. There are some variants of the T-34 that are really deadly. So the OT-34, the T-34 that has a flamethrower in the hull, that is massively dangerous, but it's also extremely expensive. And that means it's very difficult to play because your army will get very, very small because you're sinking that many points into that one tank. I know a lot of Soviet players. Many of them have a T-34 standing on their shelf. It stands on their shelf. What they bring out is the Steward, the Tokarev, or the Katusha in the tank slots. Those three are the main go-tos for all Soviet players. The T-34 gets the occasional airing as an OT-34, but never as a T-34. So, sorry again, disagree massively. The Steward is absolutely the best tank for Soviets as well. Now we get into something more fun, because let's go and see something that isn't Stewards. It's the Germans. Now, Mordian Glory recommends you taking a Panzer IV, and then he talks for quite a long time about Panzer IIIs. The right way to go is to the Panzer III if you want to win games again, because the Panzer III comes in a darker version where you can get double coaxial machine guns. This will mean that you have quite a lot of shots comparative to a Steward. In shots, you still have a light AT gun, and you have an 8+ tank. Perfectly adequate for what it needs to do. Especially for Germans, you're not going to go and do that tank off with an enemy tank, because for Germans, you have Panzerfaust everywhere. What on earth do you want a heavier tank for? The heavier tanks for the Germans are massive point sinks. They are a point trap. Don't go there. Don't buy them. For theme, yes, go and get yourself a Tiger. There are some very, very nice models, especially Rubicons. I love those Rubicon sets. But you're not going to use them. What you are going to use is the Panzer III, or even the Panzer II, the Lux, with the light autocannon. That as well is a very good tank. Something that is actually useful, and especially for rookies, won't handicap yourself, right? You're handicapping yourself when you're buying that heavy tank, because the rest of your army becomes anemic. It does not work. Which is why we never see Panzer IVs in tournament play, and especially not in the top half of any tournament for the last 4 years, more or less. So that was the Germans. What about the Italians? Well, no, sorry, the Japanese. For once, we are in complete agreement. The Chiha Type 97, that is the go-to tank. Yes, Japanese tanks are not very good, and in the tank slot, you might want to get yourself a mobile howitzer instead, the Horo. But if you're buying yourself a Chiha, and I mean, I have one standing on my shelf over here, get yourself the Chiha with a howitzer. That's the useful one, because the light anti-tank guns on, or even I think you can get some with a medium anti-tank gun, not massively useful. The howitzer, though, is a threat both to enemy tanks, especially with the pins, and to infantry, which is what you want. So get yourself a Chiha with a howitzer. That can even sit behind your horde of infantry and shoot indirectly, which is the same thing that you do with your Horo. The only thing is the Chiha is closed top, the Horo is open topped, has a bigger gun, but is open topped, can be pinned by the enemy just sniping away at you. So in that respect, I agree, the Chiha is possibly the better choice here, although the Horo is a very close second for me. Italy. For Italians, Mordian Glory recommends the Italian M13/40 light tank, which is a darker tank, to be fair. There's just one that's a little bit better, which is the M15/42. The M15/42 has 4 machine guns. So again, it's something that's very, very dangerous to infantry. Although, again, I will say, if we're looking in the tank slot and not just tanks, I think that there are better ways to go. There are better choices for this as well. Look at the light vehicles for especially desert Italians. They've got some really interesting options with autocannons, and with the Italians gaining the reroll on 2+ penetrations, the autocannons are really, really interesting. So Saharianas and that stuff, that works. But if we're looking at just tanks, I think the M15 is just better. It's 145 points, so a little bit more expensive, but it just has so many machine gun shots, and it can split fire 10 machine gun shots 2 ways, right? What's not to like with that? And that was my response to Mordian Glory. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you Mordian Glory for making the video, and it really inspired me to do this one. And yeah, that was it. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.